We continue now at the top of Daf Samachayim Beis in Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 65b. The Mishnah said that the next step in the procedure by the Olas Ha'of, Shisa Velo Hivdil, he rips the animal lengthwise and does not separate. And the Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, V'shisa, it says in the Pasuk, V'shisa. We'll take a look at the full Pasuk. The Pasuk says, V'shisa oso b'chnafav. Again, he tears it by the wings, Lo Yavdil, he doesn't separate. V'hikter oso hakohen hamizbecho al ha'etzim, asher al ha'esh, olahu isherech nichoach l'Hashem, and then he burns it. And so it says in the Pasuk, V'shisa, and the Brisa says, Ein shisua ela biyad. Shisua means that he does it with his hands. V'chein hu omer, and likewise, it says in the Pasuk in Sefer Shoftim, this is by Shimshon, it says, Vayishaseyu keshesa hagadi, and he tore it. And Rashi here explains, V'chein hu omer b'Shimshon, it says that by Shimshon, V'hasam mefarish behedya, and there in the Pasuk, it says explicitly, to v'yad have that it was with the hand, and that's how we know again, that Shisua is with the hand. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, Lo Heser es Hamora. Then it said in the Mishnah that if he doesn't remove the crap, or any of the procedures that take place after the application of the blood, so all of those are not going to disqualify. And the Gemara says, Masnisin delok Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon. Our Mishnah is not like Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon. Rashi explains, Masnisin de Katani, our Mishnah, which says, Hivdil b'malikas chatos. Let's say he does separate, meaning he separates the head from the body when he does the malika by the chatos. Shemolka b'shnei simonim, meaning he does the malika through two of the simonim, the two pipes, puzzle, so it is disqualified. That's what it said in the Mishnah, because that's an avoda that takes place before the application of the blood, before the squeezing of the blood. So there it is puzzle. Delok Rebbe Elazar. So the Gemara is saying that does not follow Rebbe Elazar. As the Gemara continues again, Masnisin delok Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon, that our Mishnah is not like Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon. The Tanya, as we learned in a Brisa, Amar Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon. Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon says, Shamati, I heard Shemavdilin bechata sa'of, that one is mavdil, or if one is mavdil by the chata sa'of, it is not going to disqualify. Rashi explains, Shemavdilin she'im hivdil, that if he does separate, meaning if he does cut two of the simonim, the two pipes, by the chata sa'of, so lo pasal, so he doesn't create that disqualification. And so therefore, clearly according to Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon, there's no disqualification, and our Mishnah said that there is a disqualification, so our Mishnah is not like Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon. And the Gemara says, My beinayu, what is the difference between Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon and our Mishnah? Rashi explains, My beinayu kolomar, what it means to say is b'mai kamiflagi, what is the root of their machlokus? We understand what the difference is. The difference is whether if the person was mavdil, if the kohen was mavdil, whether it's disqualified or not. That's the machlokus. The question is, what are they arguing about? And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Chisda says, Mitzoy chatas ha'of ma'akev ika beinayu. They're arguing by the squeezing of the blood of the chatas ha'of, is that ma'akev, is that required or not? Again, we mentioned earlier that there is the sprinkling of the blood of the chatas ha'of, and then there's the mitzoy, the squeezing of the blood of the chatas ha'of, and it's a machlokus whether that squeezing is required or not. And the Gemara continues and explains, Tanakama savar mitzoy chata sa'of ma'akev. The Tanakama holds that mitzoy by the chata sa'of is required. V'kevan de mitzoy, and so since that is the case, and he's going to be squeezing the blood, the Shinui Nuschos has v'kevan de kamatzi ledam, if he is going to, since he's going to squeeze the blood, ki mavdil ka'avid, so therefore, when he does separate, when he does do the malika of two simonim, so ka'avid maisa ola b'chata sa'of, he's essentially doing the exact same procedure by the ola sa'of, he's doing that by the chata sa'of, and we're going to see later on that itself is a disqualification. If you do the procedure of the ola sa'of by the chata sa'of, that disqualifies. And so therefore, since mitzoy is required, and mitzoy is part of the procedure by the ola sa'of, and now he's also cutting two simonim, so therefore that's a disqualification. That's the explanation of the Tanakam in our Mishnah. Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon savar, but Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon says, mitzoy chata sa'of lo ma'akev, it's not required to squeeze the blood by the chata sa'of, so even if he does cut two simonim, which is similar to the ola sa'of, but without the mitzoy, if he's not doing that by the chata sa'of, so it's not similar to the ola sa'of, it's just umechatech basar bi'almahu. It's simply cutting the meat, and therefore it's not considered a disqualification of copying the procedure of the ola sa'of. And Rashi explains, Tanakama savar mitzoy basar hazah b'chata sa'of. Again, the mitzoy takes place after the sprinkling of the blood by the chata sa'of, then there's the squeezing out of the blood, so that's ma'akev, that's required. V'kevan debal karchom and matzadam. So since we know he's going to have to squeeze the blood, iamrid mavdil. So if he's going to be mavdil, he's going to separate. Ka'avid kol ma'isa ola bechatos. He's going to be doing all the procedure of the ola by the chatos. Malika muvdeles umitzvah. He's going to do that full malika that separates, and the mitzvah and the squeezing. The ola mitzvah hu da'avid, because by ola it is mitzvah, it is squeezing of the blood which is done. Well, kamon tanan, and later in the Mishnah we're going to learn the chatos ha'of sha'asa kemaisa ola, that if the procedure of the ola is used by chatos ha'of l'shem chatos psulan, again done for the sake of the chatos, that is a disqualification. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon savar lo mi'akev, but Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon says the mitzvah is not required. Hilkach, therefore, imratza lahavdil yavdil. If he wants to separate, he could cut both simanim. V'lo yimatze la'achar avdala, then just don't squeeze the blood after that separation. V'lo avid lei ma'isa ola, and he's not going to be doing the procedure of the ola. V'im mishum deshina b'havdala. Now, if the issue you'll say is that he changed, he deviated in terms of the malika because he did a separation, kaven delav ma'isa ola, since he's not doing the procedure of the ola, matzi l'meimar b'chitoch basar bi'almahu, we can say that that was simply cutting of the flesh, and therefore it would not be a problem. And the Gemara continues with a second explanation of the machlokas between the Tana Kama and Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. Rava Amar Rava says, Shehiyah b'simin sheni ba'ola sa'of ma'akev ika beinayu. The machlokas between them is, can there be a delay by the cutting of the second pipe? You have, again, the wind pipe and the food pipe. By the cutting of the second pipe by the ola sa'of, can there be a delay there between the first and the second pipe? That's ika beinayu. That's the difference between them. Tana Kama savar Shehiyah b'simin sheni ba'ola sa'of lo ma'akev. The Tana Kama says that if there's a delay by the simin sheni, by the ola sa'of, it's not a requirement, it's not really a problem. V'afagav de shehiyah ka'avid ma'isa ola b'chatas, and therefore, by the chatas, as we'll see, there is definitely going to be a delay, because there is a procedure that will take place between the two simanim, but even if there is a delay, so nevertheless, he's doing the exact procedure of the ola by the chatas, because there can be a delay by the ola sa'of as well. For Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon savar, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon holds ma'akiv, that it is required, meaning you're not allowed to delay when it comes to the ola sa'of. V'kevan d'shehiyah, and so since he delays by the chata sa'of, so therefore it's not a copy of the procedure. Mechatech basar bi'almahu, he is just cutting the flesh. And Rashi explains, Hachi Garcinon, this is the proper text, Shehiyah b'simin sheni ba'ola sa'of ika beinayu. The machlokas between them is when there's a delay by the second simin, the second pipe by the ola sa'of. B'ola sa'of itzrichu bei simonim. Now again, by the ola sa'of, there's a requirement to cut both simonim. V'shah shir shehiyah bein simin l'simin. Now let's say he delayed the amount that is considered a delay between each pipe. Ika beinayu, that's the machlokas. He pasal ba b'shehiyah bein simin l'simin ke behema olo. Is there a disqualification because of that delay? Now, by an animal, there would be such a disqualification, but does that apply by ola sa'of? And Rashi continues, Tanakama savar shehiyah b'simin sheni b'ola sa'of lo posla. The Tanakama holds that that delay by the ola sa'of is not a disqualification. The lo dami l'shchitas behema. It's not similar to slaughtering an animal. The time of the behema boy beisimonim. Now, the reason why by an animal, by the shchita, you need to do both pipes, mishum de lo nafka chiyusa b'simin echad. That's because the animal will not die if you just cut one pipe, you just cut one siman. Hilkach shem shchita al shneim. Therefore, it's really all one shchita. The shchita of both pipes is the shchita of the animal. Avol oaf, but when it comes to a bird, b'siman echad paska chiyusa, you cut just one siman, it's not going to be alive anymore. V'ola sa'of mitzvahs havdalah bi'almu. By the ola sa'of, the fact that we do two simanim, it's just a mitzvah of separation. The ika Allah, that's a mitzvah that's by ola sa'of. It's not because only through that it would be considered a malika. Avol shem malika enochal el al harishon. It's only called malika when it comes to the first siman. V'lo mahanya shia lifsol b'sheni, and therefore if there's a delay, it will not create a disqualification according to the Tanakama. V'chatas shehivdil ban. Now by a chatas, let's say you cut both simanim. Afagav develo shehiyah i efshar bein siman l'siman. It is not possible by the chatas to do it without a delay. There will for sure be a delay between the two simanim. Kedetani lekaman b'shmaitin, as we're about to see later on in the sugya. Shebetchila chotech shedro mefarekes below rov basar. The way he does it is first he breaks the spine and he breaks the nape without cutting the majority of the flesh, and then he gia l'siman chotcho, then he reaches the pipe and cuts it, v'rov basar imo, and then he cuts the majority of the flesh with it, v'hi chatichas rov basar, and that cutting of the majority of the flesh, afagav de isbei shir shehiyah, even though there is a delay there, kaven de v'ola shehiyah bein siman l'siman lo pasla, but since by an ola also if there would be that delay, it's not a disqualification. If he's going to do that by the chatos, again he's going to be to be copying the procedure of the Ola by the Chatos. That's why, according to the Tanakam, it's a problem. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon Savar Shia B'Simin Sheni B'Olasa Of Pasla. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon says delay by the Ola would be a disqualification. Hilka Chatos Shehivdil Ba. Therefore, by the Chatos, if he does a separation and cuts both Simonim, Kevan Shi Efshar Lo Below Shehia Ben Simin LeSimin. Since there it's impossible without delaying between the Simonim. Ein Kan Maisa Ola. That is not a copy of the procedure of the Ola. Deva Ola Shehia Leka, because by the Ola there's no delay. Umechatich Basar Bi'almahu. Therefore, it's just considered cutting flesh, and it's not a disqualification, according to Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. And finally, the Gemara says a third explanation of the machlokus between the Tana of our Mishnah and Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. Abaye Omar Abaye says, Rov Basar Ma'akev Ika Beinayu, with this very issue about the majority of the flesh, that cutting in between the Simonim, that actually, whether that's required, is actually the machlokus between them. Rashi explains, Rov Basar Ma'akev Ika Beinayu Dukuli Alma, Shia Ba'ola B'Simin Sheni Pasla. According to this approach, everybody agrees that if there's a delay by the Ola, by the second Simin, that would be a disqualification. So there cannot be a delay, and therefore if there would be a delay by the Chatos, it would not be a copy, but the question is, does there need to be a delay by the Chatos? V'hacha b'ha pligi, here's the machlokas is as follows. L'tanakama chitach rov basar b'chatos lo ma'akev. According to the Tanakama, cutting that majority of the flesh by the Chatos is actually not required. Ilo machtechle, if he doesn't cut, it's not a problem. V'yamrit mavdil, so therefore if he's going to do a separation, avid le shnei simonim beloshi, he actually might do both simonim with no delay. V'yesh kan ma'isa ola, so you will have a copy of the procedure of the Ola. That's why it's a problem, according to the Tanakama. For Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon Savar, Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon holds Rov Basar B'chatos Ma'akev, the majority of the flesh, cutting that in between is required. V'chatichaso achar simin risho, again, that is cut after the first simin is cut. V'kevan de lo sagi below shia b'intayim, since it's impossible without a delay between the two simonim, ein kan ma'isa Ola, we do not have a copy of the procedure by the Ola. And the Gemara continues, Uveplugsa de Rabbi Zeir of Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. This is the same machlokas that we find between Rabbi Zeir and Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak in terms of how to interpret the machlokas between the Tanakam and Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. Chad Omar, one says, Shehia b'simin sheni ba'ola sa'of ma'akev ika beinayu. One says that the machlokas between them is whether a delay by the second simin by the ola sa'of is required, meaning it's problematic or not. The Chad Omar, and one says, Rov basar ma'akev ika beinayu. The machlokas between them is, again, Rov basar by the Chatos ha'of, is that a requirement? So is there necessarily going to be a delay between the two simonim or not? And the Gemara continues, Mechlal, now this entire discussion implies the bo'inon de rov basar betchila, that at least lechatchila, you do need to do this rov basar. If you're going to cut one simon, you're going to cut the basar after, you're going to cut the flesh after. That seems to be a lechatchila according to everyone. And the Gemara says, yes, that is indeed true. V'atanya, as we learned in the following brisa, ketzad molkin chatas ha'of, what's the procedure of malika by the chatas ha'of? Chotech shedro mefarekes, again, he cuts the spine, he cuts the nape, below rov basar, without cutting the majority of the flesh, ad shemagia leveshato lekana, until he reaches the esophagus or the windpipe. Higia leveshato lekana, if he reaches the food pipe or the windpipe, chotech simin echad, then he cuts one simin, o rubo, or the majority of it, verov basar imo, and the majority of the flesh with it. That's when he cuts the flesh. Uva and by the ola shnayim, o rov shnayim, again, then he's going to cut two, or the majority of two, again, talking about the two pipes that are cut by the ola. And the Gemara continues, Amrua Kamei de Rabbi Yirmiyah. They said this over in front of Rabbi Yirmiyah, explaining the machlokas between Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, and the Tanakama. And essentially, they're all giving explanations. All of these explanations are explanations for Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. Why is it that Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon says there's no disqualification? And the Amoraim were explaining why it's not essentially a copy of what is done by the Ola, and that's why there's no disqualification. And when he heard these various explanations, Amar, he said, Lo shmiya lehu hadi Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Yakim, Mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Padas, Mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. They did not hear that which Rabbi Shimon ben Yakim said in the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Padas, in the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, that Omer Hayer Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, that Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon would say, Shamati b'chatas ha'of shemavdilin, that I heard by chatas ha'of that one can separate, that really it's not a prohibition in the pasuk. Umay lo yavdil, and what is the meaning of the pasuk when it says lo yavdil? And Rashi explains, Mechlal devo'inon rov habasar lechatchila. This implies that the majority of the meat, lechatchila, again, the majority of the flesh needs to be cut after the siman lechatchila. Midukam miflagi bikuva, from the fact that they're arguing of whether it's a requirement. Mechlal dekulu modu lechatchila. Everybody agrees that at least lechatchila, boy lachdoch rov basar achar siman. You have to cut the majority of the flesh after the siman. And then the Gemara brought a brisa which described the procedure this way. Shedra chut hashedra. Again, that's the spine. Mefarekes is etzem hatzavar, that's the bone of the neck, the nape of the neck. Below rov basar, without the majority of the flesh. You first do that without cutting the majority of the flesh. Hamakefes of, if there's the flesh around it. Kedamrinan b'hakal shochtin, and we explain this in hakal shochtin, that nishbara mefarekes v'rov basar ima, that if the mefarekes would break and also the majority of the flesh together with it, that would already be nevelo metame, would already be a nevelo and tameh. V'afilo mefarcheses, even if it's mefarcheses, meaning even if it's moving involuntarily. Hilkach, therefore, yavechotech rov basar kodem hasim. And the problem is as follows: if he's going to cut the majority of the flesh before cutting the pipe, havalei meis, it's already going to be dead. V'lo mahanya b'malika, and therefore it's not going to be an effective malika. V'simonin halacha l'moshe misinai. And again, the fact that it has to die through the simonim is a halacha l'moshe misinai. That's why this is necessary. Shnayim o rov shnayim, again, two or the majority of two by the olasof. That's how many pipes are cut. But hakol shochten amrina, and hakol shochten we say shnayim l'rabbanan. It's really the bryce over here is saying according to various opinions. Shnayim, you have to cut two pipes according to the rabbanan, and rov shnayim l'Rebbe Elazar Rabbi Shimon, and the majority of the two pipes according to Rebbe Elazar Rabbi Shimon. V'hasam pligi ba b'kray. Over there, the machlokas has to do with interpretations of psukim. And then the Gemara said, Amrua kami de Rabbi Yirmiyah. They said over the various explanations of Rebbe Elazar Rabbi Shimon in front of Rabbi Yirmiyah, lahach plugsa dahanach amoroi de pligi b'taim de Rebbe Elazar Rabbi Shimon. Regarding this machlokas of the Amoraim, how do we explain the reason of Rebbe Elazar Rabbi Shimon? Again, that it does not create a disqualification if both pipes are cut by the chatas ha'of. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samech Vav Amud Aleph.